Welcome back. This is part 2 of the power sequencing design series for the Xilinx Zynq-7000 SoC board. In the previous video, we went through the full schematic, breaking down the regulators, the sequencing logic, and how all the different voltage rails are brought up in the correct order. If you haven't seen that yet, I highly recommend checking it out first. You can find it linked in the description. Now in this video, we're going to take it a step further and look at how all of that is actually implemented on the PCB. We'll go through the layout, the floor planning, and the power distribution network, and I'll show you how to translate the schematic into a clean and reliable physical design. This is where things really start to matter, because even if your schematic is perfect, poor layout can still cause major issues. Alright, let's dive into the layout. Just like in the schematic, we're going to start with the input power circuitry, and this is actually a very typical and recommended way to approach PCB layout. You want to follow the flow of the schematic, and more importantly, the flow of power through the system. So you start at the input, in this case the DC jack, and then work your way through each stage step by step, following how the power is distributed across the board. This creates a natural structure to your layout. Instead of placing components randomly and trying to connect everything afterwards, you're building the design in a logical sequence, starting from the source and moving outward. This approach also helps with things like current paths, trace lengths, and overall organization, since components that are electrically related will naturally end up physically close to each other. Another big advantage is debugging and readability. When someone else, or even you later on, looks at the layout, it becomes much easier to understand how power flows through the board, because the physical placement reflects the schematic. So especially for power designs like this, where sequencing and distribution are critical, following the flow from input to output is one of the best ways to keep the design clean and reliable. Alright, looking at the input circuitry, we start at the DC barrel jack, which is the main entry point for power into the board. From the jack, the power is routed directly toward the fuse, and here I'm using a wide polygon trace instead of a thin routed track. The reason for that is, this is the highest current path on the board, so we want to minimize resistance, voltage drop, and heat dissipation. A wider copper area lowers impedance and improves overall robustness. You'll also notice that the path from the jack to the fuse is kept as short and direct as possible. That's intentional, because we want the fuse to be the first line of protection. If anything goes wrong, like a short circuit, we want the fuse to react before the rest of the board is exposed to high current. After the fuse, the power continues using short and wide polygon connections into the current sense resistor. Again, same reasoning here. This is still part of the main current path, so we keep everything low impedance and compact. Short paths also help reduce unwanted inductance, which is especially important when dealing with switching regulators later on. Now, from the current sense resistor, the layout splits into two different purposes. The main power path continues forward, still using white copper, but at the same time we branch off with thin traces that go to the current sense test pads. These thin traces are intentional. Since these are just measurement lines, there's essentially no current flowing through them. Making them wide would not add any benefit, and keeping them thin actually helps visually separate measurement paths from power paths in the layout. Also, by routing them in parallel from each side of the resistor, we get a proper differential measurement across the resistor, which improves accuracy when probing. Continuing along the main power paths, after the sense resistor, we reach the diode used for reverse polarity protection. This diode is placed in line with the main power flow, so that if someone accidentally connects the supply backwards, the diode blocks the current and prevents damage to the rest of the board. Placement here is also important. We want it close enough to the input stage so that everything downstream is protected. And finally, after the diode, we reach our main VCC rail. This becomes the primary distribution node for the rest of the board, feeding into the switching regulators and all subsequent voltage rails. So overall, this section is all about creating a clean, low impedance, and protected path from the input connector into the rest of the system, while also giving us the ability to monitor current and protect against faults. The VCC rail here is only used to power the very first regulator, which is the one generating the 5-volt rail for the rest of the system. So instead of spreading this high voltage rail across the entire board, we keep it very localized. As you can see, the regulator is placed physically close to the DC jack, and that's done on purpose. The idea is to keep all of the high voltage, high current input circuitry as compact as possible. By doing that, we minimize trace length, reduce losses, and also limit the amount of noise that can propagate into the rest of the board. So the VCC connection from the diode into the first regulator is kept short and wide, typically using a polygon or a thick trace. Short because we want to minimize resistance and inductance, and wide because we want to handle the current efficiently and keep voltage drop low. Another advantage of this approach is that we contain most of the switching noise from this first regulator to a small area near the input stage, instead of letting it spread across the board. So overall, placing the first regulator close to the input and keeping the VCC path short and wide is a key part of creating a clean and efficient power design. So looking at the first switching regulator that generates our 5 volts, let's focus on the local floor planning around this part of the circuit. When it comes to switching regulators, placement is extremely important, even more important than routing in many cases. Ideally, we want to keep everything as compact as possible. Starting at the input side, we can see that the input capacitors are placed very close to the VIN and ground pins of the regulator. This is critical because these capacitors form the high frequency current loop for the regulator. During switching, current is rapidly drawn from the input capacitors into the regulator and back to ground. So this loop needs to be as small as possible. By placing the capacitors close, we minimize the loop area, which reduces parasitic inductance and lowers impedance. This helps improve efficiency, reduce voltage spikes, and also minimizes electromagnetic interference. So this small detail of placing the input capacitors tight to the regulator is actually one of the most important parts of a good switching regulator layout. On the output side, we follow the same principle of keeping everything as tight and compact as possible. Right after the regulator, we have the diode placed very close to the switching node. The goal here is to keep that current loop as small as possible, since this is another high-frequency switching path. From the diode, we go directly into the inductor. This node between the regulator, diode, and inductor is what we call the switching node, and it's one of the most critical parts of the layout. This node switches very fast and carries a lot of noise, so it's important to keep it physically small. That means short traces, minimal copper area, and avoiding unnecessary spreading of that node across the board. The smaller we keep this node, the less parasitic inductance and capacitance we introduce, which helps reduce ringing, noise, and EMI. Then on the other side of the inductor, we place the output capacitors. This is where the switching waveform gets filtered into a stable DC voltage, which in this case is our 5-volt rail. Again, these capacitors should be placed as close as possible to the inductor and the ground return, forming a tight loop to keep impedance low and improve performance. So overall, the layout here is all about controlling these current loops and keeping the noisy switching areas as compact and contained as possible. The feedback network is placed pretty straightforward, nothing too special going on there, but there is one important thing to keep in mind. You want to keep the feedback network as far away as possible from the switching node. The reason for that is that the switching node is very noisy, it's rapidly switching voltages and can couple noise into nearby traces. Since the feedback pin is a sensitive signal that the regulator uses to control the output voltage, any noise injected here can cause instability, ripple, or incorrect regulation. So even though the placement itself looks simple, the key idea is to keep that area clean and quiet, and physically separated from the noisy parts of the circuit. Before we zoom out and look at the entire power distribution network and all the planes, let's first go through the local floor plan of the other regulators. There's no need to go through every single one in detail because they all follow the exact same layout principles. So we'll just focus on one of them, and once you understand that, you can apply the same thinking to the rest of the design. Each regulator is essentially a copy of the same structure with the same placement strategy, same current loops, and same considerations for minimizing noise and impedance. So let's take a closer look at one example and break it down. So looking at this 3.3 volt regulator, it's a different part compared to the 5 volt regulator, but all the same layout principles still apply. Starting at the input side, we have the input capacitor placed as close as possible to the VIN and ground pins of the regulator. This is critical since this capacitor forms the high frequency current loop during switching, so we want to keep that loop area as small as possible. You'll also notice that there are multiple ground vias placed right next to the ground pad of the capacitor. This is done to reduce the loop inductance even further. By giving the current multiple low impedance paths down into the ground plane, we improve the performance of the decoupling and make the entire loop more effective. So even though the regulator itself is different, the core idea remains the same. Keep everything tight, minimize loop area, and provide a solid low impedance return path. The output that goes directly into the inductor is our switching node. Just like I mentioned before, this is a very critical node and we want to keep it as small as possible. That means short connections and minimal copper area, since this node is switching very fast and can generate a lot of noise. By keeping it compact, we reduce parasitics and limit how much noise spreads into the rest of the board. After the inductor, we arrive at the 3.3 volt node. Here we place the output capacitors, in this case 2 of them, positioned in a way that keeps the output current loop as small as possible, so the current flows from the inductor into the capacitors and back to ground through a very tight loop. This helps stabilize the output voltage and reduces ripple, ensuring a clean and reliable 3.3 volt rail. For the rest of the circuitry, the placement is a bit more flexible. That said, there are still a few important guidelines to follow. Like I mentioned before, the feedback network should be kept as far away as possible from the switching node. That's exactly what I've done here, placing it in a quieter area of the layout to avoid noise coupling into the feedback signal. For the rest of the components, like the power good circuitry and the enable circuitry, the placement is mainly driven by the pins that they connect to. So we try to keep them close to their respective pins to avoid unnecessary routing while still keeping the layout compact and clean. And of course, there's also a bit of an aesthetic aspect to it. Keeping the layout organized and pretty might not affect functionality directly, but it makes the design much easier to read, debug, and maintain later on. So overall, once the critical parts are handled, it becomes a balance between good electrical practice and clean, structured layout. Pretty much the exact same floor plan and local routing is repeated for each and every one of the other power rails. Since we're using the same regulator family to generate all the different voltages, the layout strategy stays consistent across the board. That's actually a big advantage, because once you've done one properly, the rest becomes a matter of copying that proven structure and adapting it to the specific voltage rail. So each regulator follows the same pattern: tight input loop, compact switching node, inductor placed close, output capacitors forming a small loop, and the feedback network kept away from noise. This kind of consistency not only makes the design easier to implement, but also easier to review and debug, since every power stage behaves in a predictable way. So once you get one right, you've essentially solved the layout for all of them. Now moving on to the overall floor plan of all the regulators. As you can see, all the regulators are placed and spread across the bottom side of the board on the same side as the power jack. This is done intentionally to keep the entire power system in one area, making routing cleaner, and also keeping the noisy switching circuitry away from the more sensitive parts of the board. But more importantly, the placement of each regulator is not random. It's very strategic. Each regulator is placed close to the part of the board that actually uses that specific voltage rail. For example, the 1.35 volt rail is placed near the DDR memory section, since that rail is primarily used by the DDR interface. The 1.0 volt and 1.8 volt regulators are placed closer to the SoC, specifically near the regions that consume those rails. This helps reduce the distance the power needs to travel, which lowers impedance and improves stability. And then we have the 3.3 volt rail, which is used by a large portion of the board, things like I/O, peripherals, and general circuitry. Because it's so widely used, its placement is a bit more flexible, and it's positioned in a way that allows it to distribute power efficiently across the entire board. So overall, the idea here is to place each regulator as close as possible to its load, minimizing trace length, reducing voltage drops, and creating a more efficient and robust power distribution network. And that's pretty much it for the layout and floor planning of the power sequencing design. Hopefully this gave you a good understanding of how to take a schematic like this and actually implement it on a PCB, focusing on placement, current loops, and overall structure. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe for more PCB design breakdowns, real-world examples, and deep dives like this. In the next video, we're going to zoom out even further and take a detailed look at the full power distribution network of the board. We'll go through how to properly design the PDN, how to place decoupling capacitors for complex system on chips, and how to make sure all these voltage rails are stable and reliable in a real design. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next one.